want you to hit me as hard as you can.
This is the Joe Blow El Nino interview. Just the general feeling that a lot of us get about like when you're the victim of a crime, even if it's a small one. The police try to solve it, but they're kind of overworked, and you just kind of feel victimized, and you're left there. There's no sense of justice, and it's very seldomly delivered.
Yeah.
I can remember me and my brother were living here in a shithole off Sycamore in Hollywood. It was kind of a crack house type apartment building, and people died in there and OD'd, and our shit was vandalized. I remember coming home one day, opening my door to some guy robbing my place, and I'm talking with him. I figure he knew my brother or whatever, or Taylor was like outside or something coming in, and he lights up a cigarette, sits down on the couch, and then I suddenly realize this prick's robbing me. So also, if you look at the justice system as it's been in America for a long time, we don't really trust it anymore. And that was kind of an important thing to me, and a bad thing to have to deal with. So I just kind of started there with a sense of none of this is really working anymore, Okay.
All right, so what were some of the particular challenges in filming on location, both in Toronto and Boston?
It was the first time I had done anything, filmed anything anywhere,
Yeah.
So I just almost immediately preferred filming on location. Much more exciting. It's less controlled than in a studio. So in the studio you kind of more have the time, and moves and lighting and everything like that is a lot easier. Actors are centrally located, but there's some excitement about shooting on location that just sort of jived with me. So I preferred it right away. The majority of it was shot in Toronto for financial purposes. It was cheaper to shoot there. We didn't have much money, $6 million. But we got a couple of days to shoot in Boston, so we reserved a lot of the outside photography, a lot of the stuff in that opening credit sequence.
Yeah.
Those are Boston landmarks. We got a helicopter, news chopper those days to shoot a lot of the helicopter photography. We made sure to get the boys walking across Copley and all that stuff. So we wanted to kind of set that, since we only had a couple days, and we got the prison shots in there, which I really like. We were the last to shoot in the Charles Street prison, which was a shut down prison, which is now it's like an awesome. Stayed there once. It's an awesome.
It's ridiculous.
It's an awesome like restaurant, bar, hotel type thing. It's fucking terrific.
Yeah. All right. So, do you have any favorite on-set stories or memories from the first Boondock Saints?
Oh man, there's like a million of them. There's a million of them. We were all a bunch of crazy kids going through that together. Rocco had never shot anything before. He was my dearest friend. My producer, Chris Brinker, God rest his soul, was his first thing. Norm and Sean were virtual unknowns at that time. We were all just a bunch of crazy kids doing crazy shit. It happened every day. There was just a feel on this set that was just magical. Even all the people that worked on it, all the craftsmen and keys, and all the way down to PAs, just kind of felt this rumbling motion, like something different was happening here. So there was this newness to everything. But some of the stories, sure, I can remember some on and off set. I remember this one time, Rocco was working this waitress at this place, Johnny Baker's, that we all fucking drank at after we shot.
Yeah.
And he's telling her, I'm going to film with Willem Dafoe, and she doesn't believe him, so he brings Dafoe in, and she comes up with a napkin and he asks him for his signature. And Dafoe knew, that Rocco had been trying to work this girl, so he goes, I'll give you an autograph if Rocco says it's okay. Like right in front of everybody, and the whole place just kind of looked at her. Rocco was like, yeah, go ahead. And he did it, and she did it. There was little things like that on and off. I mean, we went out and played paintball once. Me and Flannery were on the same team. We housed everybody.
Yeah.
That cat scene was funny as hell to shoot. I totally lied to Rocco and told him that it was a thing called a blood cannon under the table.
Yeah.
And I said, it doesn't even make a sound. Meanwhile, it went off like a fucking howitzer. So that reaction you see of him blasting back is real, And strangely enough, he stayed in take. He kept going with it.
Yeah.
But there was like a million little things. I remember when Dafoe left, he came into the this bar we were all having dinner at, because like you'll have guys that you shoot out in a couple weeks, and
Sure.
everybody just fell in love with each other, and he had that last moment with us, and that's when, the only time he got a buzz on, got a couple good drinks in him, and started just, it was like a hoorah thing, and he wafted out of there like the, King of England, jumped in his cab and got taken away, and we all kind of felt that loss for a second, but the next day we were right back at it, So there's all these stories of doing your first one like that, especially when it turns out to be embraced like Boondock was.
Yeah.
You almost feel like that's one of the reasons that even though everything was stacked up against Boondock, nobody should have seen this little tiny movie. You almost think that's one of the reasons that it did, because there was some kind of magic in there with everybody that made it.
Yeah.
And it came through on the celluloid, and that's that,
Right, man. Are there any characters, I mean, you mentioned your brother, but any other characters that are based on people that you know?
Well, I mean, Rocco
Yeah.
was. I mean, he happened to be me and my brother's boss. We worked at the same bar as bouncers, and Rocco was our manager.
Okay.
I just loved his personality so much, and we were so tight. So he would be, one of the ones that a role was written for. And 2, I wrote Romeo for Clifton.
Yeah.
With full intent of giving him that role. That was able to happen.
Of course.
So yeah, there've been a couple times when you write for specific actors or friend actors that you're acquainted with.
All right, right on. So casting this film, and in particular, I was wondering what led you to cast Bill Connolly, because he was known for comedy at that point. How did you come to that?
Because we fell in love the second we met. Billy's just one of those guys. I also thought going against the type. What we knew about Billy at that point was Head of the Class and a couple other smaller things.
Yep.
Majesty Mrs. Brown showed that his acting chops. I knew how talented he was, how good he was, but it was who he is, his personality, who he really was,
Yeah.
that I almost got to know immediately. He also looked like what you picture when you think of God. And I knew that role, that's a force of nature character that's suddenly coming into the third act.
Yeah.
Probably only has 10 or 15 minutes in the whole film, that becomes
Yeah.
like, biblical shit is now raining down on you.
Yeah.
So I knew I was excited about going against cast with a guy like Billy, knew he could handle it, and
Yep.
he was pissed off that nobody ever cast him as a bad guy. He wanted that hard, and he knew nobody was going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of came after that role a little bit too, and once we started talking about it and I started seeing it, what we could do with this guy, the wardrobe,
Yeah.
the gun work, how he looked, who he was, it just, again, that was one of those perfect moments in casting with just like, yep, look no further,
Yeah. And is it true that you guys chose to give him a cigar because he couldn't stop smiling? I read that online. I didn't know if that was
Yeah, there's a bit of truth to that, yeah. But he also is a huge cigar smoker.
Okay.
So he was smoking on set while he was like doing these little, for the neighborhood we were shooting in, the neighborhood families. He was doing a comedy show.
Oh, nice.
He's smoking, and I realized how cool he looked with that and how comfortable he looked with it in there
Yeah.
too. So there was that aspect of it too. I was like, why not?
All right. Yeah, fair enough.
He still managed to smile with that damn cigar in too, though. You still kind of see it, He's like,
How
in
could
his
you
teeth.
not love playing that role?
Yeah.
So what are your feelings on the legacy of this film, and what do you think led for it to be embraced as a cult classic?
My feelings on the legacy of Boondock. I don't know that I could have asked for anything better. I mean, how's a sequel to an independent film shot for bus fare
Yeah.
even viable to do 10 years later, Why are fans jumping all over themselves for 3? They want a third installment of this. It's still viable.
Yeah.
It just has this stay power. So in terms of legacy, there's like this shelf life with Boondock. It's like uranium. It just never really goes away, and new generations of fans come in every year. So it just keeps building and building. It's one of the stranger things I've ever seen, but it's also kind of, I guess, what cult is. It's a cult classic. So, in terms of the legacy of Boondock, I couldn't be prouder or happier
Absolutely.
to know that we built something with that kind of impact and that kind of touch people. I guess what was the biggest surprise about it was the whole idea of people embracing it in terms of believing in what the brothers' mission was. You know, I wanted to do this movie as a kick-ass thrill ride, enough artistic stuff, enough funny stuff, enough clever cinematography and scenes, doing the crime scenes backward the way we did, where you'd see the investigation for. I just wanted to make a slick, awesome ride that we love, but I never expected people to embrace what the brothers do. But I guess now I can see it again with our failing justice system. It's one of those things that allows us to drift into fantasy and say to ourselves, geez, I would like guys like, if it was going to happen, I'd like it to be guys like that in every major city.
Yeah. I don't know if you're allowed to say this or not, but it's been 7 years since we've last seen the Saints. Where do you see them now?
Well, I approached the idea for 3. It took me a while to crack that code with a very simple thought, you know, because like you risk going off the fucking edge with stuff like this. The fans know every frame of both those films so well. You know, it's almost like riding with shackles on. You need to know that story, never trespass anywhere, never leave a hole. But then what about the entirety of it? What's that story? What's the theme of that story for the next one that makes sense and adheres to the other 2 films as well? You know, it took me a long time to figure that out, but it came with the answer to a very simple question. If that happened and suddenly these 2 brothers were captured and put on trial, thrown in prison, they would suddenly be the news for a long time, and everybody would know who they were. And depending on what you believe, they're either mass murderers who deserve to be hung, or they are justice-seeking vigilantes that are doing the job that our system's not. Right? So it would split the public pretty much down the middle. So I thought, all right, that's our beginning point. The fact that everybody knows who they are now and gets to weigh in on what they did, and the almost war that's starting in public based on what they did. However, these boys themselves never meant to. They didn't want to have fans. They didn't give a shit what anybody thought, but they were just doing what they thought was right. That's it. So it's one of those things where, okay, now we see how they shook our society a little bit. So I use that idea as the core idea for 3, which will be called Legion. And what happens is a group of people out there start doing a little bit of what Connor Murphy did, and they get really fucking pissed off, and they want to stop them immediately. So, you know, and then chaos ensues, and it becomes something that addresses a lot of the more core concerns that we have today. And since in our society today, we think, you know, the financial sector runs everything, that our government is corrupt, we don't trust it, we don't trust authority, we don't trust our police, we don't trust the military. There is no justice unless you've got money, and most of us don't. So it goes to that whole question. You know, it taps into that anger that we're all feeling at the end of the day, and a kind of hopefully what's an interesting twist, or a huge fucking mistake. Who fucking knows? But I love it. I love that story.
Nice. I'm looking forward to that one. So this, did you keep anything from production? Any sort of memorabilia from the film that you hang on to?
Why, yes.
Oh shit.
I kept this. 2 of them. These were the plastic replicas. The brothers' guns. These don't really exist. These are Desert Eagles that I invented this kind of triangular silencer for 2, and they were so heavy on the brothers that they made these kind of rubber replicas that they could carry around when they weren't actually firing them. So I kept these. A couple other things. I got some memorabilia around here.
So, what was your experience with Boondock Saints before coming aboard to the second movie?
You know, there's this huge, crazy legend surrounding the original Boondock Saints, and you know, it hit the trades. There's this story about these Irish brothers. It was written phonetically, so if you can't even do an Irish accent, it was there. You know, I think everybody wanted to meet Troy, and my lawyer at the time was doing deals with him, so he wanted to rep me, my lawyer, and he said, hey, who do you want to meet in this business? I can introduce you to people. I said, I want to meet Troy Duffy. and he says, I'm going to go see him on his birthday next week, June 8th,
Yeah.
which is 8 days before my birthday. So in essence, my entertainment lawyer is one of my best friends, David Krinsman, brought me to Troy Duffy. So Romeo was Troy Duffy's birthday present.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So do you have any favorite stories from the filming of Boondock Saints 2?
I think my favorite story is when our producer got a little lit up on a Friday night when we were getting ready to go out, and he was walking down this long row of stairs with giant bushes surrounding it, and
Yeah.
he slowly tumbled into it, landing on his side and moving like a robot and not getting up. We had to run up and pull him out of the bushes. It was pretty funny.
Very nice. So what has your experience been with the fans so far? Do people come up to you and yell, ding dong, or?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I've had people yell, "Ding dong, motherfucker! Who ordered the whoop-ass fajitas?" I was with my fiance at the time, walking down Hollywood Boulevard, and you can kind of sense when like certain people get they get a whiff of who you are. Like I look different in all my movies, so you just see the look in their eye. And I saw this guy at the coffee shop. I saw his eyes. We just kept walking. And next thing you know, he's running down Hollywood Boulevard. I could hear his feet behind me, so I slowly wanted to make sure he wasn't getting too close to me. And then he looks at me and he just goes, "Ding dong, motherfucker, ding dong."
Nice.
And I said, "Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good day."
Very nice.
Moving on.